Hello and welcome to our ServiceNow and Ansible Tower integration demonstration. My name is Andrew Matheson. I'm a Specialist Solutions Architect here in the Red Hat office in Melbourne. And it's my pleasure today to take you through a couple of different use cases. So let's have a quick look at what those use cases are. So in terms of an overview today, we'll be looking at three different use cases. The first use case that we'll look at is the native connections to ServiceNow with Ansible. We'll be looking at the modules that are already available for you to interact directly with ServiceNow. So we'll be raising a request, closing off a request, etc. Following up from that, we'll look at our self-heal use case, where we're going to pretend we have a monitoring solution in place. That monitoring solution will then reach into ServiceNow with a failure. ServiceNow will then reach out to Ansible Tower in order to remediate, and we'll see that end to end. The next one is that self-service use case, where we're going to act as a business user. We'll log into ServiceNow, open up a service catalog item, and in this case we're going to be doing a multi-cloud deployment, and we're going to request that from ServiceNow without having any need to log into Tower in order to get that deployed for us. Alright, so let's look at the first use case. So use case 1 is native connections to ServiceNow with Ansible. Really simply, again, we're going to make use of the modules available in Ansible to connect into ServiceNow. The first thing we'll do is we'll create the record. Second is we'll update the record. And third, we'll go through a couple of phases to close off the record. When we look at an incident as an example, we have to pass it through a resolve stage and also a close stage. So we have to resolve it before we can close it, and we'll see that now. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I find myself at the Tower login screen now, so I'm going to log in to the environment. Right, so we've logged in, and by visiting the template screen, I'm going to simply run a template to raise a snow incident. Now before we do that, what I thought I'd do is just show you very quickly in terms of this native integration I spoke about. So what we've got here is the snow record module. So this is my playbook that I'm going to fire off in my Tower instance, and I'm starting out with a couple of simple modules here using the snow record module. Now the module is what has already been developed for you, really the heavy lifting with how to interact with ServiceNow. Now, I'm in VS Code here, which is a great open source project provided by Microsoft, and it is allowing me to add an extension so I can go straight to the module index. So I'm highlighting my mouse over this snow record, and you can actually get there by going straight to the module index. I have already got it open, so let's have a quick look. The module index for this module has a number of different parameters that you can use. So I always encourage people to go through here and really understand what these modules can do and what the inputs are. I love to scroll down to examples. That's where I love to copy and paste, but you can certainly see what kind of fields you can put in here. So the snow record represents that ServiceNow record, and it can either be typically an incident or a request. And you can see down here that we have the table. So in this one it's a sys user, but you can have incident or request in there. And then you can also pass it through different parameters as you go. So in this case, what we're doing is just simply doing a short description, test incident only. We're giving it a severity and priority. The caller ID, so that's a ServiceNow user account, and the caller ID is the system administrator. And we're putting in a comment, some comment, blah. We're also registering that output to output to console when we create this record. Now what we're doing is we're simply going to open it and close it at the same time. Now we're using the same module to do that, so the snow record again is called, but what we're doing now is we're passing it through different states. So you'll see here that it's going through state 6, which basically means mark it as resolved, and we're putting a comment in, and then finally we'll do a stage 7. So stage 7 will close out that ticket. I won't go too much into detail there, but that's really what we're calling when we run this template. I'll do the incident one. So we've got our template, and the template in terms of Ansible Tower is where we combine all of our credentials, inventory, and the project, and ultimately the playbook that we wish to run. We can also specify some variables in the extra variables down here. In this case, I'm just saying open tickets true, close tickets true. But the intent of this is really just to open and close that ticket to see it interact with ServiceNow. So I will just fire off and launch on this template, and you'll see the output as it comes on screen. So my first task was to create the incident. It's created it. We've output that incident number onto the screen, incident 10021. And then we're going straight into close. So we're doing stage 6 and stage 7, and everything was changed as we went through there. So I will simply copy this incident now, and we'll do a quick search. There are quite a few incidents, and there it is. So we see that it's test incident only. That was our short description. And then we go through here and we can see our incident lifecycle. All right, so we've got our incident comment blah. I'm sure that's the best practice to write a comment like that. But then once we've done that, we're immediately closing it and resolving it, and then ultimately marking it as closed. And we can see that the state has been changed to closed. So that is just a very simple use case on how we open and close an incident in ServiceNow. Typically, you'd have this as part of perhaps a workflow. It could be the monitoring use case, and we'll talk about that in the next use case. But quite simply, what we did there is just show the Ansible module and how easy it was to open it from Ansible into ServiceNow. Okay, moving on to use case 2. This is where we're going to use Ansible Tower for self-heal. It will be used with ServiceNow and essentially to complement the monitoring solutions. So we'll be using Ansible Tower to monitor the server first and foremost. We'll play the role of a bad actor and we'll log onto that server and we'll stop the service. And because we're monitoring in Ansible Tower, we'll create the incident automatically into ServiceNow. From there, ServiceNow will launch a business rule, and it will identify the incident as a repeatable incident with a well-known fix, and that being by Ansible Tower playbooks. And from there, we're going to remediate the server. Now, in terms of what we're doing in the playbook, it's quite straightforward. And first of all, we're going to install IIS. Now, because Ansible is idempotent, it's simply going to report back that this is in the desired state already. It means that no change is going to be inflicted on the server because it's already in that state. Second part of this is that we'll start the IIS service. Now, because again it's idempotent and it will act on this service because it's stopped, it will run this task and it will come back as started. Next thing we do is we copy the good copies of our templates for that website. And from there, it will be copied and the website created. Now, again, because of Ansible's idempotent nature, this won't actually change anything. It will just come back and say it's already in that state. The idea of this playbook is it can be run on a schedule, and the only thing that will change for us is that we'll restart the service because it was stopped. Right, so once that has been remediated, we'll contact ServiceNow again and we'll close the incident. All right, so let's take a look at that. So to kickstart this part of the demonstration, I've logged into a Windows server as administrator, and I'm quite simply going to stop the World Wide Web publishing service, and that is effectively rendering my website down and out of action. So flipping back into Tower, we have a monitoring IIS incident. So what we're doing here is just checking constantly that the IIS server is up and running. And I will run that now. So this is not going to take any action. It's actually going to check for that service that it's in a started state. And if it is in a stopped state, then it will raise an incident into ServiceNow. And we'll see that very shortly. So my template has executed. And what we have is we have a check IIS installed and running. And what we're doing is just going through and checking it, registering that output. And then if it is in a stop state, we'll raise an incident into ServiceNow. And we can see that that is definitely the case here. So I'll copy that incident number, and we'll go into here. That was a different incident. We'll search for it, and there we go. So the incident has been raised, and ServiceNow is using a business rule to determine an action for that particular issue. And because it was an incident that was a well-known incident, that business rule then contacted Ansible Tower to start that remediation. And we have here that the server has been remediated and everything is working as expected. We're also taking it through two different states. We're marking it as resolved, and we're also closing it off. So in Tower, we start in our jobs menu, and this is really all these jobs that have run previously. We can see that the monitoring IS incident, that was the template that we ran in order to check the IS machine. That found that that service was out, so it raised a ticket into ServiceNow, and that's where that stopped. ServiceNow then used that business rule to contact into Ansible Tower to start remediation. So looking into this particular job run, we can see that we go through a number of tasks here. And one of the first tasks that we do is update ServiceNow to indicate start. And that's very important to put that linkage between ServiceNow and Tower to really make sure that the request has been received and automation has started. When we get to the Start IS server service, you'll notice that it comes back as changed. And that's because that particular task, its job was actually to start the service, and because it was not in that state already, it marked as changed and started the service. We also have a task here to create the website content, but because that content again was already in the desired state, it simply marks that as okay. What we're doing now is we do a few other tasks here, open firewall port. It all comes back as okay. But really what we're doing here is starting that service and contacting into ServiceNow again. So we're marking it as resolved, and then we're closing off the incident as our last task. And when we saw the ServiceNow record, everything was marked as restored and closed off. So if we look back at our server, we can see that the World Wide Web publishing service is now running, which is absolutely fantastic. It means it's all been resolved, and it's been resolved automatically. We haven't had to involve an individual at this point or a team. So a lot of administrators out there might get a page in the middle of the night to take action. In this case, we've done it all automatically, and if we couldn't achieve the result automatically, we could put a few checks in there. We could definitely then escalate that request to get a real person to investigate further. So use case 3 is all about self-service deployments. We're going to play the role of a business user in this case. We're going to log into ServiceNow, and we're going to go straight to the service catalog. In the service catalog, we'll find one for provisioning to multi-cloud, where we're going to deploy a couple of machines to AWS and one to Azure. We'll also install IIS and Apache. The first thing we do once that's approved is we'll connect to Tower's REST API. So Tower runs a full REST API, and what we're doing at this point is simply calling a workflow template. But before we call that workflow template, it's very important that we call back into ServiceNow to mark the change as started. We want to just make sure we've got that visual link to say, yes, I've received that request, and we'll definitely do that via a comment into the job. Once that's done, we'll launch straight into our Tower workflow. And the Tower workflow is where we're bringing together multiple playbooks, lots of little playbooks to create that complex business outcome. Right. So once that workflow is going, and we'll see more of that as we go through the demonstration, we're going to provision the infrastructure and applications to AWS. All right. Now, once that's complete, we'll obviously mark it as with status updates, and you can also mark it as complete at the end, or pass to different teams for further approvals and closure. All right. So let's take a look at that now. So for this demonstration, I've logged in as a business user into ServiceNow. Now, business user here might be a project manager, Project managers are often tasked with running projects that require quite a bit of infrastructure, and sometimes those requests to those individual IT teams can take quite a while and a lot of effort. So what we're able to do here is create a service catalog, and we'll access that now, in regards to deploying multiple infrastructure deployments, and we're going to be looking at a multi-cloud deployment here today. So what we're presenting with the user here is a form to start to create that infrastructure that they need. Now this example is a pre-canned demo on deploying multi-cloud infrastructure with Windows and RHEL, IIS on Windows and Apache on RHEL, and then once this form has been completed, the infrastructure will be provisioned. And really what we're asking for here is variables that will help Ansible Tower make up or start that automation. Right, so we're asking questions here about the Azure and AWS regions. We're deploying into Sydney in this case, but also at the project level, you might have requirements around who's the primary contact of the change, what cost center. So we'll fill out that right now, and also special projects. You can have as many variables as you want in here, so whatever is required to drive the automation, and it might be a simple thing like how many machines would you like? How many machines do you want in Azure? How many machines do you want in AWS? And perhaps give the flexibility on what applications you want installed. In this case, we are installing IIS and Apache. This is a common change, but as soon as we hit order now, the request will be approved and then the infrastructure will be deployed via Ansible Tower. So let's hit that order now button. Okay, so we've hit the order now button. ServiceNow is obviously creating this request, and we have that created successfully. So let's take a look at the request itself. We'll go straight into the activity stream for this request. And you can see here that the very first item of interest is the approval. So in this case, it's been automatically approved, and the condition there was it was under $1,000, doesn't need approval. You will have the ability to have multiple different teams approving this if that is required, and it might be that the IT team needs to approve it, as well as a finance team and perhaps a project team itself. But once that's been approved, ServiceNow will then use an outbound REST message into Tower. So Tower has a REST API. That message will be sent, and this template that we have created will automatically start and start the provisioning. The first thing we see back from Ansible Tower is, again, a message to say that it has started. I've received the request. I'm now going to start the automation. And I think that's very important to do that. It just puts that link between ServiceNow and Tower and says, yes, I've definitely started and I've received your request. All right, so that's it for the moment. Let's have a look at Tower and what we see. So we do see a couple of different jobs running here. The main one of interest, and this is the job template that we called via the API, and it's a workflow job. So unlike templates that we've run before, which were individual playbooks running to achieve a purpose, a workflow template in Tower has the ability to string all of these different templates together. So think about a workflow template in this use case. Those teams that create these templates, you might have one team that does the provisioning templates, as well as one team that does updates, security hardening, and then followed by a team that does the application installs. So you could picture this as teams that are working independently. They don't have access to each other's content, and the workflow allows us to string them all together and ultimately execute it to achieve the business outcome. So the first thing that we'll see in this workflow when we first start is we have this ServiceNow Snow notify start, and that's that message that we saw in ServiceNow to say, yes, I've started, I've received the request, we're good to go. If that fails for whatever reason, we have a failure path, right? So if it fails to update, it couldn't reach into ServiceNow, we'll mark it as failed. Now that's important because sometimes if you can start these requests from Tower, and perhaps you don't give it a valid SNO request number. If that SNO request number is not valid, it could fail at this point, really driving home the importance of change management. The next thing we do in parallel, so if the update to ServiceNow is successful, then we start with a project resync. And what the project is in Ansible Tower is the linkage to our source control. So we're pulling down all of our playbooks, and we're doing a project update here. So that's pulling down all that latest and greatest content in source control, making sure that we're running the latest versions of our playbooks. The next part that we do here is we're running job templates to deploy. So again, this could be the deploy team. We're deploying to AWS for Windows, AWS for Linux, and into Azure. All right, so that's deploying those machines. The next part that we have is an inventory refresh. So when we provision our infrastructure, we're tagging it dynamically in those cloud endpoints, and it's no different to on-premise if you're installing to the likes of VMware. Dynamically tagging it, and then once it's created, we're doing a refresh. So the inventory refresh will pull the latest and greatest versions of that inventory. In our case, we're time-stamping it as well as stamping it with the ServiceNow request. And that ServiceNow request is the key here because we're only going to act on the infrastructure that's tagged with the request number. Once the inventory has been refreshed, we can then move on to our install phase, so the application deployment. And here we're installing IIS, Apache, and also IIS on Azure as well. Once that has been successful, and you can see that the IIS Azure was quite quick, that will then notify out to ServiceNow that that portion of that request has been successful. And along the way, wherever we're running job templates in in Ansible Tower, we can click on details. And if we click on details, again, we're seeing that console output of that individual job template, and we're able to go through and see what tasks have been executed and perhaps where there might be an error if required to investigate. You can see there it's all been installed, everything has been opened and started, IIS has been installed, and then that template has finished. And when we go back to the workflow, because that template has finished successfully, it will take the success path. And in the case of IIS on Azure, it notifies out to ServiceNow that the request was successful. So back in ServiceNow, we can see that the comments have come through, obviously, for the IIS installed. The others are still running. But as they complete, we can put more and more information in here. You could perhaps attach a report of the deployed infrastructure. You can build that up. And then you can also mark this request as closed, or perhaps transfer it to a different team for further approval or closure. Okay, so in this use case, we saw that we acted as a business user. We logged on, we chose our service catalog item, and from there, after approvals, we've launched straight into that REST API and started our workflow. We, of course, have commented the job up front to say, yes, we've started, we've received that, and that's very important for people to know that, yes, that request is underway. We can also do status updates via emails and other such things, but for the moment, we're just using ServiceNow and commenting. We launched our workflow template. We've strung together a whole lot of different playbooks there in order to achieve that outcome, where we've deployed to AWS, Azure, and we've seen that we've deployed IIS and Apache. All right, so that concludes our use case demonstration for today. I hope you've gained some good insight into how you could use Ansible, Tower, and ServiceNow to really improve your automation. The first one we looked at was native connections into Ansible. We looked at the playbook, and we saw that you could start really easily by integrating into ServiceNow. The next one we looked at was the self-heal, so really helping your IT administrators out, particularly in after-hours situations where things go wrong. Let's try a little bit of automation and a bit of intelligence in there to say, raise a ticket, fix it up. If it can't be fixed up, then perhaps raise a ticket or an escalation to a team to take action. The last one we looked at was a self-service. We really empower the business users to start to request deployments. And that really plays nicely into the time saving where you're not having to ask different teams to help you with deployment. You're really ordering it from a service catalog and then being able to pump it through an Ansible Tower workflow and saving a lot of time and effort. So in terms of next steps, there's a link on your screen that is the Inside Playbook, and it's a 3-part blog, and it's a very good place to get started with the integration of ServiceNow and Tower. It takes you from the very beginnings in using those modules, but then it shows you how to create the service catalog and outbound REST messages in ServiceNow for forwarding into Ansible Tower. A very good place to start. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.